Hey now, good morning. Happy Tuesday, PASW staff, clients, friends joining us for, come on, for Tuesday's class. I already said it. Yesterday we looked at your film scoring assignment, La La Land. So hope you guys come up with something fun for that, kind of an energetic jazz montage of all the scenes we looked at in Los Angeles, all the sites. But want you guys to come up with a good little jazz score. So get that into me by today would be terrific. And today is kind of our pre-advanced class. We're going to revisit a composer, and just want you to we're going to re-look at his life, what he started, all of these ideas and things that we talk about. We need to keep them in our minds that, a good backstory is good, a biography, where the person came from, what he contributed musically while we're talking about him hundreds of years later, or 100 years later, 150, you know what I mean. So today we're going to look at and revisit Erik Satie. We've mentioned Erik Satie maybe once or twice before, but now we're going to finally talk about him and his music. None of you, probably many, don't know that name, but I guarantee you everyone's heard his most famous song. We're going to look at that song later after we kind of go through his life and the history of what's going on with his musical career. Great composer and super important in so many ways. French composer, and born in 1866. So this is a long time ago, and he's going to influence the 20th century tremendously with his musical ideas, and how he was really kind of one of the first modern composers. For a while I kind of thought Debussy was, but reading about Erik Satie, he was really modern, and for being so early, late 19th century, and romantic, but also a modern composer, and we'll talk about him. So welcome to Erik Satie's class. So although he's a composer, he was really influential and responsible for changing the artistic movement at the time going on, and being one of these persons that brought change into going into from romantic to modernism. And he is one of the early influences of minimalism music that we've talked about with Philip Glass and Steve Reich and John Adams, and repetitive music. And we're going to look at some pieces that are pretty mind-blowing, actually. So his whole thing about music, it's simplicity. Well, listen, it's simple music. And he's one of the first, and to do this in 1866, he's born, so he's writing in 1880s. Music was lovely, nice, beautiful, orchestral, big. He simplifies it down into a minimal way, into something that he creates, which is background music. He's kind of the first composer to write background music, and that's not in a negative way. He's setting a mood, and that's why he's so important. So let's just get into his life, and then we're going to go back to that idea and look at some of his pieces. He didn't become famous until 45, so he was, throughout his early years, he was kind of poor and struggling, and it wasn't until Ravel and Debussy started programming his music. So they were responsible for getting him seen, and we did a class on Ravel, and great orchestrations and lovely melodies, but they thought he was terrific, and he was considered like the laziest student in his college conservatory program. They said he lacked sight reading skills and technical skills, and that he needed to be a better piano player. I mean, he didn't, I don't know if he flunked out, but it was probably equivalent. But when he was 40, he returned to college and music school, and developed his classical chops and technical skills, and graduated at the top of his class. So it goes to show you, you're never too late to go back for education, or you're never too late. And, maybe when he was, 15, 18 or 20, he just wasn't ready to go to college. He had other creative ideas. It wasn't until he was 40 so everybody learns at different, paces, and everybody's different. There's no competition, Some people are just meant to go back at different times. Some people aren't meant to go to college at all. You don't need to. So he's kind of playing popular music in salons and not really, after college, and not really kind of wandering here. So when he's 22, he writes probably the most famous thing that people still remember, that is one of the most lovely pieces ever written, Gymnopédie. And there are three movements. Gymnopédie is it's just one of the most beautiful pieces. You can see how this sounds modern. This sounds like a piece that could, if you wrote it today, you wouldn't think, well, this was written in 1888. This sounds like it could, people still use it in film scores today because it just sounds lovely and modern. And music was not sounding like this at all in 1888. This is the height of Wagner's operas, and this is the height of huge orchestral classical stuff by Tchaikovsky and Ravel, and beautiful epic music. And then he just simplifies it, like we talked about. He simplified music into this really just piano piece that sounds... and Megan said she played it, so that's cool. We should have her play it when we come back to school. That sounds really simple. I don't know. At least for me, it was hard to play, and it sounds so easy to play. But it's one of the most relaxing, just nicest pieces ever written. This was a huge departure, though, from other music that was going on, and I think Ravel and Debussy said, actually, this is romantic, beautiful music. He just took a step back and completely changed music. And critics turned to this furniture music, or background music. And if we think about it, he was maybe the first film composer. He didn't write for films, but when you think of, wallpaper music or music to set to a scene, either on stage or a play, this music fits perfectly for background music, but also for foreground, obviously, because people listen to this to relax or to study for things. But this is, perhaps he's the first to write mood music. Mood music, sorry about that. And also ambient music. And if you remember, we talked about the ambient songwriter-composer Brian Eno, where he was doing this stuff in the 70s. And he does refer to Erik Satie as a huge influence on him. But if you think what Erik Satie was doing this like 100 years earlier, it sounds so modern and fresh still. But it was in an era of the romantic music that was sounding nothing like that. Yet it does sound romantic in some ways. So if we listen and look at this piece, it breaks so many musical rules. There's not really harmonic structure. There's not a story in the music where there's a melody line that's telling you a story. You don't go on a journey that's, beginning, middle, and end. It doesn't really develop, but boy, it works so well. So, this is truly revolutionary for back then. You didn't do this. You had to develop back then. You had to develop motifs and modes. That's probably why he didn't do well in college, because they didn't like this. They don't like the wandering mind of this. Especially back then. These long sustained rhythms and so technically, like we mentioned, it's not super hard, but what the hard part is performing it with heart, and performing it is with so much soul and sensitivity. That's the hard part about this. And he was really one of the first composers to do that, where the listener gets lost in the music. So Erik Satie, just a huge iconoclastic composer that he changed music. He died in 1925, so pretty early at 59, and was a very unusual, odd performer, composer, free thinker. Had a ton of umbrellas in his little apartment and didn't let anybody inside, and his apartment was just supposedly a mess. Eccentric guy, but one of the first kind of composer to write mood, background, ambient music that we take for granted today, but for back then, what a genius he was. So you remember we looked at that about a year ago, and I want you to think about today before tomorrow's class. We're gonna do an advanced class on and look deeper into the Gymnopédie, the most famous, lovely song that we just looked at a minute ago. And so if he's the first modern composer, one of the first modern composers before Debussy, because he's writing this in the 1880s, that's something big to think about. We looked at Offenbach last week. Sounds nothing like Offenbach, and it's the same decade mostly. It doesn't sound like Strauss. It's romantic music, though. It doesn't sound like it's not romantic, but it doesn't sound anything grand. It's intimate, it's moody, it's background music. Huge for the 1880s. I mean, huge. Nobody was writing this kind of stuff because it sounds so fresh today. I mean, like I said, I mean, it's in soundtracks today. It's still a piece that everybody loves for some reason. It's just so. Think about this piece, because we're going to take a dive. We're going to dive deeper into this piece with Erik Satie and George Shearing tomorrow. So it'll be terrific. Too much fun probably, but we'll contain ourselves. So love you. Have a great rest of the day. We're going to look at it tomorrow. So bye.